Welcome to Proven Improbable, where we focus on metals, mining, and more. I'm your host, Maurice Jackson. Today, we will address why citizens, not just investors, need to own physical precious metals, as banks, the world of academia, and television have perniciously tricked us into calling currency money. Today, we will reset your hard drive and remove this virus. And most important, we will share what actions you, the investor, need to take. Joining us for this very important discussion is JS Mindset's Bill Holter. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Thanks for having me, Maurice.
Mr. Holter, you're one of the most respected names in the natural resource space. For first-time listeners, please share your background.
I was a retail broker for 23 years. The last 12 years I was a branch manager. Retired in late 2006. Moved with my family to Costa Rica. We were there for about 5 years. The timing, if you think about it, I saw 2007, 2008 come in and we wanted to get out. When I realized the collapse came but was dealt with by blowing up balance sheets, our Spanish got better and better, and I realized that when the dollar went, so would all foreign banks, and Costa Rica, of course, uses dollars as their reserve currency. So we moved back to Texas and figured we will ride this thing out shoulder to shoulder with like-minded people. So when I got back from Costa Rica in 2011, I wrote for a couple years with Miles Franklin, and for the last 2 years, Jim Sinclair and I have partnered and post at jsmindset.com.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, Bill, to set the tone for today, can you please define for the audience the difference between currency and money?
The difference between currency and money is really the biggest difference is that money is a store of value. Currency is a medium of exchange. Over time, the medium of exchange gets diluted. In other words, governments will print more and more of that currency and dilute the value. It's important to understand that dollars, when the Federal Reserve began back in 1913, dollars and $20 gold pieces were interchangeable. You could go into a bank with $20.67 and walk out with an ounce of gold, or vice versa. And then they broke that link in 1933. And since 1933, they've been printing more and more dollars. But it's important to understand that dollars, the constitutional definition of a dollar, that's what a dollar truly is. But when they bastardized it, dollars became derivatives of gold. In other words, they were receipts for gold, and then they cut that tie, and now dollars are the antithesis of gold. They're the opposite.
Thank you for sharing that. And just to clarify for first-time listeners, if you're not aware of a derivative, think of it in these terms, that orange juice is a derivative of an orange. All right? Now, Bill, when listeners go to a bank or take a financial course or watch the financial portion of the news, the discussion of gold is never referred to as money or as a prudent investment. Why is the narrative on gold negative all the time?
Well, it's portrayed as a commodity, and gold is not a commodity. Gold is money. You go back to J.P. Morgan in 1907 after that collapse. He testified to Congress that gold is money, everything else is credit. The reason gold is not discussed, taught, or understood, and it's not understood on purpose. In other words, the monetary authorities don't want you to understand gold, is because gold is the direct competitor to the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency of the world.
You know, I'm a graduate of North Carolina State University, and I recall as a business major, I was taking my financial courses, and never was money ever defined, and we certainly never discussed the merits of owning gold or silver. Now, recently I posted a video entitled "Shocking. I called the Fed, and you won't believe what they said," in which I called the Federal Reserve and the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and I asked, why is the word money not printed on a Federal Reserve note? And after 4 hours of correspondence, I couldn't get an answer. And to add further, a Federal Reserve note's composition is 75% cotton and 25% linen, so it's not even printed on paper, as paper is derived from trees. Now, Bill, why do you believe the word money is omitted on our currency?
Well, if you look at any fiat currency, if you look at euros, British pounds, yen, yuan, whatever, you'll never see the word money. And that's because they're not money, they're currency. You may see the word currency, but you won't see the word money. And that's because there is a real distinction between currency and money.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better.
They're technically telling you the truth. By not putting the word money on it, they're technically telling you the truth. And it's also important to understand that dollars can only be created via debt. Dollars, all fiat currencies are a debt-based in origin. In other words, in order to create money, for instance, you go out and you buy a car or buy a house or whatever, and you borrow money. That money is created out of thin air by the fractional reserve banking system. That's how dollars are created. That's how the currency base is expanded, is through the use of credit. And what we're going to see is a contraction of credit, a contraction of the monetary basis, and thus a collapse of the credit pyramid or edifice, whatever you want to call it.
Well, in essence, what you're sharing with the audience here is that the only way, under this current system of Keynesian economics, the only way that, in essence, our economy grows is through debt. So thank you for conveying that.
Right, and if you think about it, if that's the only way the economy can grow is through the use of more debt, that creation of new debt has got to continue, otherwise the economy goes in reverse. And that's exactly the way Ponzi schemes work. Ponzi schemes work as long as they've got new investors. Once the new investors dry up, and let's equate new debt with new investors, once the new investors dry up, the Ponzi scheme collapses, and that's where we're headed in the credit structure.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. And for first-time listeners, please refer to Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, why it would be unconstitutional to print the word money on our currency, and that a dollar is 371.25 grains of silver per the 1792 Coinage Act. So the word dollar should not even be printed on our currency because, again, when you hold a Federal Reserve note, that's not 371.25 grains of silver. Now, Bill, you know this, and I know this. Why is this not common knowledge, and why is it so critical for investors to be able to discern the difference?
Well, it's not common knowledge because the bankers, the banking system, the government, they don't want people to know this because it behooves them. Think about what what Mr. Rothschild said. He doesn't care about anything else as long as he can create or control the creation of money. As long as he can control the money supply, he can control everything. And that's what it's all about. It's about control. And keeping the masses dumbed down is, in effect, their way of taking and then keeping control.
Which is it's very pernicious. It frustrates the dickens out of me, as I know you're very passionate about it. It is. It truly is. And what we're sharing, ladies and gentlemen, is not conspiracy theory. These, again, that's why we're providing you a preponderance of evidence with the Constitution and the 1792 Coinage Act. And we also, I mentioned the video. Please watch that video. I provide you the phone number to the Federal Reserve and the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. You can simply call them for yourself and ask the question, why is the word money not printed on a Federal Reserve note? Now, Bill, this ignorance is not germane to the United States. You recently resided in Costa Rica, and the citizens there call their currency money. Now, I find it ironic when I travel to Canada or Europe that all the citizens call their currency money, yet when they refer to another country's medium of exchange, they don't call it money. They state currency. So if every country calls their currency money, then why is it when you travel abroad, the first thing you want to know is the currency conversion, not the money conversion?
Well, because again, they are all, including the dollar, they all are all currencies. They're not money.
And it's so critical for investors to understand that. I think anyone that's traveled now across, anywhere abroad, they can think back of when they traveled, the counter that they went to exchange their currency. It was called the currency exchange. It was not called the money exchange. Words are very, very important. Now, I believe that if investors wish to become financial stewards, they must be able to define money versus currency. Now, Bill, you've achieved financial success that many aspire to accomplish, and you have private relationships with some of the world's financial elite. Share with us why this distinction is so deeply embedded within the financial elite.
Well, the financial elite understand the difference between money and currency. They understand that currency over time debases. I think the average lifespan for currency is something between 15 and 30 years. Currencies are used until they're abused, and once they're abused too much, they go into hyperinflation. Then the currency goes away and they're replaced with another currency.
Now, the currency that is in circulation today in the United States, is this our first currency?
No, it's actually the third or fourth currency. I mean, you could go back to prior to 1887, and they had the greenbacks.
Yes, if investors are not aware, we, as the United States, started off with the Continental, and that went to a value of zero, and then we went to the greenback, and that went to a value of zero.
Right, that's right.
Now, if you were a holder of precious metals during these periods, when the currencies went to zero, what happened to your standard of living?
Well, your ounce of gold or your ounce of silver was still an ounce of gold. It was still an ounce of silver. You retained your purchasing power, and those around you, if they had their money in the bank or even dug a hole and put the currency in the ground, assuming that it didn't rot, their purchasing power went to zero. So you were able to, when the system rebooted, and that's what happens after a currency goes to zero, is the system reboots, you're starting with a pile of purchasing power, and everyone else is starting with nothing. So it gives you a head start on the next credit expansion. And that's what all these, every single one of these growth periods have basically been credit expansions.
Yes, they have. And the study of money, which is monetary history, it shows that during situations such as these, when the currency either revalues or goes to a value of zero, those that are stewards of precious metals, they're able to make generational life changes because their money allows them to make some large acquisitions that they were not able to do with the currency.
Yeah, Maurice, let me put this so that your listeners understand it in plain English. What you're trying to say here is you're sitting on gold and silver where your wealth is stored. The currency blows up, it goes to zero, and you've lived within your means your whole life, and you live in a small 3-bedroom, maybe 1.5 or 1-bedroom or 1-bathroom house, and the guy at the other side of town had all his money in the bank. He lives in a mansion. It's an 8 or 10 bedroom place with 7 or 8 bathrooms and a 10-car garage. You'll be able to buy that with gold, with a much lesser amount of gold than it would have cost when the currency was still functioning. So you'll be able to increase your lifestyle with less ounces of silver or less ounces of gold, and that person who owned the mansion will be happy to do it because now he has money again.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Bill, let me ask you this. Do holders of precious metals need to hope and pray for the currency to fall to zero before they will ever benefit?
No, not at all. I mean, if you were, the currency to this day has not fallen to zero, but had you been buying gold at under $100 an ounce back in 1975, 76, the dollar continued to depreciate, and the reverse of that is it costs more dollars now to purchase an ounce of gold because those dollars are worth far less than they were back in the 70s. But the dollar still, I mean, it hasn't gone to zero. It's on its way to zero, but it's not gone to zero yet. So you've been protected. You've gone from $100 or less to $1,200 per ounce.
You know, you mentioned earlier derivatives. I also like to refer to a statement I've heard Mr. Jim Rickards shares, that gold is the constant. It is on the periodic table of elements. It doesn't change. The variable is the currency. And so
right.
Gold and silver, in essence, they don't go up. It's the currency that is either increasing in value briefly or decreasing in value.
That's exactly right. And that's what I was getting at just a moment before, is that the value, the purchasing power of the dollar as it has slipped, it takes more dollars to purchase the same ounce of gold. And that ounce of gold today is the same ounce of gold it was 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years ago.
You know, Bill,
gold hasn't changed, silver hasn't changed. It's the currencies that change.
Absolutely, and that is so critical. And as we mentioned this before, you have private relationships with the financial elite, and they understand this. This is what they teach to their children. It's just this information does not get conveyed either in the world of academia or through our parents because they weren't in that position. So thank you again for conveying that. Now, Bill, let me ask you this. In your experience, what type of investor have you found invests in physical precious metals?
Well, one type is the skeptic. And when I say the skeptic, they're skeptical that government policy is going to do what it says it's going to do. And the skeptic has done well. Of course, the other type is the people who truly understand the difference between money and currency. Currency is a hot potato. You don't want to hold on to currency much longer than you can before you spend it on something real. The only thing currency is good for is to use to purchase something real.
Now, let me ask this as well, Bill. You know, for a first-time listener that is about to make their first purchase, do you have a preference of gold, silver, platinum, or palladium?
Well, first off, silver is the cheapest. You can get the most ounces for your money, and silver is the most undervalued. It's undervalued not only to dollars, but it's undervalued versus, for instance, with gold. The ratio right now is about 70 to 1. It takes 70 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. But yet it comes out of the ground at 9.5 or 10 to 1. That's God's ratio. That's the ratio that silver should be to gold. So when the currencies do make their move and approach zero, silver is going to outperform gold. I would say at least 4 or 5 to 1, and more than likely 7 to 1 to get back to the 10 to 1 true ratio that it is supplied from the ground.
Now, where does platinum and palladium fit in this category for you?
In my mind, they're industrial metals. Yes, they're precious metals, but even as a precious metals broker, if somebody came to me and said, here, I've got some platinum or palladium, I don't personally have the ability to test it to know that it is either platinum or palladium. And they look similar. They're white metal. So I personally would not accept platinum or palladium. I stick to silver or gold. You can tell the difference. And in the silver area, just so your listeners have an idea, I would look toward junk silver, which is pre-1965 dimes and quarters. They were 90% silver. We've never heard of an instance of those being counterfeited, and they're broken down. In other words, they're dimes and quarters, so you're talking about small percentages of an ounce of silver, and those can be used for trade, for barter. I mean, you could go with a dime, and in a financial breakdown, with a dime, you could probably get a gallon of gas or a dozen eggs.
Couldn't have said it better. I believe that the junk silver that you're referring to, again, is the most divisible and probably the most prudent for day-to-day transactions, as you know, the average citizen cannot discern the difference between a junk silver coin and the clad coins that are produced today. So in a situation where...
But you can with the date. If you look at the date on them, and nobody's counterfeiting 1963 dimes or 1963 quarters, and if they are, there's no wear to them. In other words, they don't look like they've been used for years and years and years. They're not smoothed out, dirtied up. So you would be able to tell that, hey, it's a counterfeit.
Absolutely. In that case, somewhat more to my point was that the average citizen, if they're a thief, they're not going to go for a quarter or a dime if they're going to rob from you.
If you're going to steal big.
You're going to steal big. So you don't want to walk around with 100-ounce bars, and I personally own them, but you know there's a time and place for each type, and I think for a beginning investor, junk silver is a great way to start. Let me ask you this as well. Is it okay to store my precious metals in my bank's safety deposit box?
Absolutely not, because the banks will close, and when the banks close, you won't have access to your box. When they reopened in 1933 or 1934, they were all empty. They were emptied out. So if you had gold coins sitting in your safe deposit box, they were gone. And that's what will happen again this time. So do not store anything that you want, anything that you think is important in your safe deposit box, because they'll be empty when you finally get to see the contents.
And allow me to digress here slightly. For listeners, if you're not aware, your safety deposit boxes at your local bank are not FDIC insured. So hypothetically speaking, should your bank close, your bank is leasing that building. So the landlord can come in there basically with a locksmith and say, open this all up. So do keep that in mind. Bill, let me ask you this then. Where should I store my metals?
Not a bad idea to have some within your own reach, whether it's buried or hidden or whatever, and the rest then look for non-bank vaults. And the reason you want non-banks is because you want vaults that have no connection to any banking commissioner that can shut them down or tell them you've got to open the boxes. I broker business through Miles Franklin. They have agreements with Brinks both in Montreal and Vancouver. They also have storage agreement with Dakota Depository in North Dakota. So if you got metal that you do want to store, those are in my opinion good places. I personally store some silver that I use basically as a bank account in one of those depositories. If I need capital, I call them, tell them sell it, and they wire me a check the next day. If the banking system comes down, the metal's just going to sit there, and whenever the system's rebooted, then you have your metal to restart your financial life with.
Oh, great response. Thank you again so much for that. Bill, last question. What did I forget to ask?
Oh, Maurice, we could go on for hours and hours and hours. Maybe one of your next topics should be, because I think this is what it's all about, is that once credit dries up, the system stops. And when the economic system stops, you're no longer, even if the banks, let's say that the banks were open and you could go get money, supposedly your money, everything runs on credit, which means your local grocery store, Walmart, etc., are not going to be stocked up because they don't have little elves in the back room that bake loaves of bread and stuff like that. They require farming, they require processing, they require transportation, for example, trucking, and all of that will stop because it's all done on credit. So when credit stops, the music's going to stop, and when the music stops, you're going to have what you have, and that's what you're going to have to live on for a time until the credit system comes back up. It may be 2 weeks, it may be 2 months, it could be 2 years. I mean, it's hard to say, but everything revolves around credit.
Thank you again for sharing that. And Bill, please share your contact information for listeners that want to hear more of your commentary.
Our website is jsmindset.com. That's MINESET.com. It's a two-tiered website. We have a free side that Jim had run for 10 or 12 years before we partnered. That has remained the same. Most of my work, probably 80 or 90% of my work, my writings, go on a subscription side, and Jim and I do a weekly one-on-one either interview, question and answer from subscribers, or maybe once a month we get somebody in that we interview. Just listening to the interview to hear Jim Sinclair, in my opinion, is worth the price of subscription. It's modest. It's $119 for the year, and you will get information that you're not getting elsewhere.
Thank you again for conveying that. And last but not least, please visit our website, www.provenandprobable.com. Through Miles Franklin Precious Metals Investments, we offer gold, silver, platinum, and palladium, offshore storage, and safe deposit boxes, which are fully insured and secured by Brinks and self-directed IRAs. The website again is www.provenandprobable.com. Bill Holter of jsmindset.com. Thank you for joining us today on Proven and Probable.
Thank you for joining us today on Proven and Probable. Remember to like and subscribe for more conversations with the most respected names in the natural resource space. Check out our website at www.provenandprobable.com. The information presented on Proven and Probable is provided for educational and informational purposes only, without any express or implied warranty of any kind, including warranties of accuracy, completeness, or fitness for any particular purpose. The information is not intended to be and does not constitute financial, investment, or trading advice, or any other advice. You should not make any financial, investment, or trading decision based on any of the information presented without first undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with a professional broker or competent financial advisor.